Yeah, we're live.
And we're live. It's Cloud Foundry After Dark.
We have quite a crew. This is like the wrecking crew of Cloud right now.
I'm super excited. All sorts of folks on here. So Andrew and I are.
We're at the Westin.
We're at the Westin.
Up the way from VMWorld tomorrow.
I'm sitting here staring at Andrew, trying to get him to make slides.
I'm trying to make slides.
He claims he's going to make slides while we're doing CFAD.
I have 3 talks tomorrow, and I have like slides for them.
That's okay. I'm writing a press release or a blog release for tomorrow, and my good buddy Kelsey actually did me such a solid. He just jumped in the GDoc and he's editing it.
Sorry. Kelsey, can you just like take over all of our marketing for us? That'd be pretty cool.
Andrew and I are.
Oh, whoa, what's going on over here? I don't know what just happened. Sorry.
He's like, I know you're lightweight water, so I'll carry you to safety, all right? But then I'm going to leave.
Come with me if you want to live.
Yeah, totally.
What's the background noise?
Yeah, I think Andrew was. I think he was accidentally starting the YouTube, which apparently has that much of a lag.
Oh.
So our ridiculous upside down picture, I have no idea how this happened. I like took a picture of us
Just
together,
go with it. It's a feature.
and
It's not a bug.
it became upside down. Okay, it's not upside down when I look at it in preview.
Works as designed. Will not fix.
This is probably like exactly what Google would say if I said, "Hey Google, this is super confusing." Google UI.
So there's a lot going on. What should we talk about?
I want to hear about Bridget's first week at Pivotal because I had an awesome lunch burrito with her, and I was totally inspired, so I'm really pumped she's here. And I think we should totally get like a first week, good, bad, ugly.
All right.
Pink is in the house.
First week at Pivotal. So it was really cool to spend my first week at Pivotal not doing my actual job. And the reason that was really cool is because I got a really good look at part of Pivotal that I won't necessarily be working in, but being embedded with the Cloud Apps team means that I actually could stand in the booth today and have some idea of what I was talking about when people asked me questions, which, hey, I suppose that's probably why Andrew thought that would be a good plan. Maybe he has good ideas sometimes.
I want you to be able to use the actual technology as part of my strategy.
Yeah. So yeah, being the thing that surprised me the most, I think, is the pairing. Like, I'm familiar with pair programming as a thing that people do, and I've even heard people, like some people at Etsy have mentioned that they do pair, like Catherine from Etsy was mentioning that they do pair ops, but like I've never seen ops done like that. So the idea of like working side by side pairing with someone all day doing ops is, I think, pretty unusual, but also pretty awesome. So that was pretty great.
Did that help you get on board? Like, there's kind of, that's why we have the dojo. There's always someone to like join up with because you never like sit alone. You got someone to go work with right away.
Right. Like, I felt like I was actually able to contribute some stuff right away because I was like, it was like the kid in Jurassic Park, right? Wait, Unix, I know this. That was pretty great, but also just like not feeling like it would be out of place to be constantly asking questions was a really good way to start learning about stuff. So yeah, I thought that was pretty awesome. I think the tough part is that I can tell, even though I really like those folks, I'm never going to be hanging out with them on Slack because that's one of the downsides to pairing is like you barely have time for email and you definitely aren't spending any time on Slack. So fortunately, since most of my team is remote, like I'll probably be able to talk to them a lot more.
That's cool. I know Curry, he is here, is from Allstate. I think he sent us now 2 engineers to come pair with us in San Francisco as well. Is that right, Matt? It's been flying by my inbox. I haven't spent a ton of time with the person, unfortunately. I've been running around, but I think there's 2 people from Allstate working on Cloud Foundry right now.
Yeah, we got one in New York working on the build with the build packs team, and then we've got one in San Francisco. And I'm not sure exactly what team he landed on, but I know he's doing a bunch of stuff with BOSH and a few other things. So they're super stoked about it.
Who was that? I think I met him.
Travis?
Travis, yeah.
Travis is in San Francisco, yeah.
Yeah, I met Travis. I think he is with the BOSH team or maybe the Mega team. like one of the kind of release something or other teams or tooling teams.
Yeah, we love it.
That was a good introduction to seeing some of the stuff firsthand or secondhand, whatever, but being able to see some of the problems and also the way they work through them was pretty enlightening. And then hearing Dimitri's constant color commentary about BOSH, it's great.
He's quite a character.
Yeah. The accent alone is worth the price of admission. Just the way he.
So what do you think of BOSH?
In Russia, BOSH provisions you. He's still here, but Dimitri is sitting.
My understanding is there's like a whole secret Twitter hashtag thing of stuff Dimitri says.
Is it all hashtag sneaky Russian?
So what do you think of BOSH?
I'm intrigued by BOSH.
See if you can get Dimitri to come on the show.
I should try. That could be fun.
No, it'd be Waters. Waters has to do it.
Dimitri and I are basically the widows of the office. We're just
because it's 11 p.m. It's 11 p.m. on a Sunday. So what's Dimitri gonna do, right?
Is Dimitri at the office right now?
He's here. I'll go here. Let's go say hi. I'm on blood.
Awesome.
Impromptu BOSH interview.
Nice. Yeah, no, I'm intrigued by BOSH. I think that there's some trade-offs that are clearly being made because it's desirous of being multi-cloud and public and private and on-prem and all this whatever. But I sit there kind of wondering, hey, but there's this thing AWS can do. Well, wait, we're trying to be multi-cloud. We're trying to also accommodate for on-prem, et cetera. And so I think that's why some of the trade-offs are there. So I do have some questions about things that I would love to see on its roadmap, but I mean, for the most part, I'm intrigued so far.
This is BOSH right here in human form.
This is BOSH.
Hi, Dimitri.
Hey, how's it going?
What do you like about BOSH, Dimitri?
Our live hangout, we're on the internet, but only 8 people watch, so don't worry.
Right.
What are you talking about BOSH? So Bridget, I don't know if you met her. She was new on evangelism team. She worked on operations this week, and Schaefer asked her what she thought of BOSH because she's been in an operations role for 20 years. Bridget, you've said you carried a pager for a long time.
Yep.
Any good?
Yeah, I'm intrigued. I think that there's a lot there, and it's clear that I was just saying that it's clear that there's some trade-offs made to make it multi-platform or multi-cloud or whatever. For example, there's things with say AWS autoscaling that it doesn't exactly do, but I'm intrigued by the ambition and scope. I think it's pretty cool.
Well, I mean, who knows? Eventually, right, we may go in there. It's just a matter of understanding where the abstractions are. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, definitely all IaaSes provide different, set of features that is hard to abstract away unless you really, really understand them and looking into them deeply enough. And I don't think we only had a clear understanding of, how to abstract away VMs, disks, some of the networking stuff, even not everything in networking. So eventually I could definitely see BOSH even getting into some more complex and IaaS-specific things and to figure out how to abstract their way. But I guess at this point, it's just the beginning and those 3 things.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing, though, is that we implement auto-scaling at the container level in our system with a dynamic router. So, an app on CF doesn't have an ELB per app. It has, a shared dynamic router, and then we have an auto-scaling service for the app. So in our world, BOSH is really just giving you more generic infrastructure that you then, format through the platform framework, more so than at the AMI level.
Yeah, but James, at some point you run out of VMs. You probably want to scale them.
But what I'm saying is that Amazon auto-scaling groups are, in my use case and Netflix's use case, often associated with ELB, metrics or some other metric of, CloudWatch around app level consumption. Not in our case, memory overhead left in the scheduler, which is where you do auto-scaling in BOSH.
I mean, or even some people have extended BOSH to do auto scaling at the BOSH level, as opposed to relying on the IaaS to, give those hints and figure that stuff out. One of the projects I think NTT worked on.
Yeah, it was
some auto scaling. Yeah.
Yeah, NTT did that.
Right. So there's a combination at the already higher level of auto scaling that can be as effective as the lower level in the IaaS.
So in the Cloud Foundry world, is it kind of like other cluster platforms where you kind of do a little bit more capacity planning, where you may throw up, if you're using 100 tiny VMs before, you may stick with like 10 larger VMs and maybe add capacity based on some type of planning versus trying to do dynamic adding 2 gigs here and there?
Yeah, that's right, Kelsey. I mean, it's just like, you're the Mr. Kubernetes, right? And so you wouldn't, you have 2 tiers of scaling. Then once you go to the container scheduler world, you don't always provision infrastructure when you provision a container, because it's orders of magnitude different in time.
Right.
That actually makes a lot of sense, because that gets to a place that it's actually solving some of the problems that I was running into when just dealing with just Docker and then scaling up more EC2 instances to hold those containers. And we were already getting to a place where that wasn't scaling fast enough, and we needed to get towards some kind of application container clustering, either looking at, Kubernetes, Mesos, something like that. And so this BOSH is really interesting to me because it sounds like it's aiming at some of those problems.
Yeah, I mean, we have a demo tomorrow at VMworld where I think we do 1,000 containers scaled on Cloud Foundry in 2 minutes. So once you have BOSH provisioned the infrastructure, the container world can transcend, very quickly, can change itself, very, very quickly. It's mostly just actually getting the images loaded from S3. Like, you could even make it faster if you just parallelize where all the images are stored that you're sucking down. It's less on the container creation. It's more oftentimes the storage of the.
Has to be IOPS. Or IOPS.
Like, BOSH is the same way. I think when Ferdy was doing the super fast Hadoop provisioning, it was.
But in a sense, it's also like you don't have the fine control when you're interacting with the IaaS. Like, you don't get to place things, right? Like, you just request a VM where once you've got the infrastructure set up and you're the cluster controller, then you can do more sophisticated scheduling in the capacity that you control.
And plus in a lot of cloud platforms, there's no guarantee you're actually going to get the VMs you want.
I wanted you to have a cameo guest star appearance.
You know where to find
This is Mr. BOSH, if anyone needs him. He's right here in the office with me 24/7.
You got to increase that buzz factor, man.
Is he still watching Say Yes to the Dress?
What?
He asked if he's watching a show or something.
Yeah, he watches the same show every night. It's kind of weird.
Yeah. He's got
Say
a show
yes
on
to the
one
dress.
monitor and a command line on the other.
If you select someone, then it'll stay on them.
Yeah. I'm just trying to figure out if James is going to keep giving us a tour of the office or if he's going to.
Do you guys mind?
We've seen that.
I saw the office this week. It was delightful.
It's tea. The one thing I always do on CFAD is go to get tea, hot or cold.
Minus the robot.
Nice.
So Kelsey, you were helping me edit that press release. Without going into it, you think it's cool? You think it's interesting?
Yeah, anytime we're building more tools that get people off of caring about host names,
Yep.
I'm all in. Like, regardless of who's doing it, VMware, Docker, Mesosphere, CoreOS, just like I was actually in China and people were still talking about host names. I'm like, that is not your biggest problem, and we don't need to build tools to solve that problem. Like, I think now, as long as there's more solutions out there, anything that gets us away from applications on a single machine. I mean, I think we're still going to have it for like databases. You know, some of those things are special snowflakes, or you go out of business if you lose all your data. But for the most part, yeah, I think it's going to be great for the whole, VMworld. VMworld's like a big fan club, man. Like, some people live in the VMware ecosystem, man. If it ain't VMware, if it doesn't start with the V, like vAir, vFood,
It's crap.
people are going to die, right? Like, hey, I can't touch that unless it has a V in front of it. So, just to service that community, because, there are people that are deeply invested in VMware. Actually, anytime I've ever ran private infrastructure, even though people talk crap, it's always VMware that's the thing that works, right? You're running EXXI and vSphere and the whole nine in your attempt to do something else. So I think it's pretty dope that you guys actually have something that is going to allow people to continue using those stacks without having to rebuild everything.
Yeah, I was really glad. I mean, number one, I think what makes you an awesome evangelist, why I'm always very complimentary of you, is you're very polyglot across all technologies. Like, you're not like just a Reebok guy or a Nike guy. You're like, hey, let's look at what's common across all of this and educate the market, because that's what's going to change things versus waving a flag. And what I think is cool about tomorrow is it's VMware saying that there is a need for a scale-out infrastructure controller. And that's part of what they're announcing tomorrow is a scale-out infrastructure controller. That's pretty huge. And obviously, our kind of cloud-native distributed middleware and platform runs really well on top of that. And what I think is cool is all the people that do wait for the V blessing, if you will. You know what I mean, Kelsey, like you're saying, they're all going to get the starting gun tomorrow. Like, no, some cloud-native architecture is a good idea. And that to me is a huge day in the industry.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the green light approach, right? There's enterprises that literally sit on the sideline until Gartner or VMware gives the green light. And when those two things happen, it actually makes it easier for me to go have those discussions, actually, right? Even though I think a lot of us compete in the same space, until the right people start saying the same things, it doesn't work.
Everything new competes with irrelevance, man. There's some overlap in our market, there's no doubt, but like in early days, everything competes with non-consumption, and you'll notice though that VMware and Gartner are right in the middle of that. My opening, right? It's very clear. Like, this is the mainstream starting gun has been signaled.
Well, plus anything has to have a market, right? I think Puppet got more deals once Chef hit the marketplace, right? Once people had something to compare to, or they brought in a different audience that Puppet really wasn't targeting, like developers, and that kind of just made it better for everyone. So that's kind of why I keep neutral for two reasons. Number one, you don't want to embarrass yourself by saying things you know nothing about, right? So if you start ignoring technology, you just start embarrassing yourself. And then second, my average lifespan at most companies has been about 2 or 3 years, so more than likely I'll be working with someone else on the other side at some point. That's just the fact of technology. So it just makes sense to just be neutral and honest when you're doing
good
stuff.
Snacks here, Kelsey.
Don't hate the player. That's what I have to say.
Snacks here. Matt Curry's a fan of us. He's at Allstate. He's super smart. He lets us help innovate with him. You get to hang out with lots of great people, Kelsey. I'll just put a little ad out for you.
Hey, CoreOS is awesome, man. I've been around the world, man. Like, I get invited twice a day to a conference, so I'm good. CoreOS is all love.
Man, Polvi would run me over with the truck. I get it. I'm just.
Oh, I don't know. He might glare at you.
Side eye.
I sat down in the front row at DockerCon and wanted to make space for Tim to sit next to me and asked Polvi if he would move over one seat, and he kind of gave me the look like, I don't know, okay.
So Bridget, this is your second week?
This is, tomorrow will be a week at Pivotal. So.
And where are you coming from? Were you at Ansible? Where were you before?
Ansible.
Ansible.
No. That's awesome. No, you're thinking of Robin. I was at Drama Fever.
She was Netflix for Korean soap operas.
Basically,
yeah. Oh, wow. Did you watch any of it?
I did. I totally had to dog food some of it because I gotta settle down with my husband for like a romantic night of K-dramas and TCP dumping. Cuddle up on the couch. It's good for troubleshooting, good for testing the iOS app,
It keeps you focused, not on TV.
It was, so I feel like Kelsey and I have been at a million of the same conferences and somehow never actually talked to each other, even though I've, been in his sessions, and I think he may have even stopped by one of mine, but it's like...
You're too cool. I was always intimidated.
Please. Like, you're Kelsey Hightower, my God. But next we got to have a contract. All right, next conference that we're both at, we need to actually meet.
All right, cool. I'm at HashiConf this month, AutomatorCon.
Which I'm not. Nope.
That's all my U.S. stuff. I mean, I'm kind of international at this point, so you got to catch me with the
international mystery.
Are you going to be at Velocity EU?
I think so. I'm going to be at OSCON EU, which runs right beforehand. So I think I'm going to have overlapping days. So if you're going to be there a couple of days early, let's hang out in Amsterdam.
Yes, I will, in fact, be in Amsterdam a few days early.
Everyone should go to Cloud Foundry Summit in Munich. In Berlin. It's going to be super fun. First week of, I saw Croft shaking his head at Munich, Berlin. He's like, oh, God, I can't let James talk anymore. First week in Berlin. I'm definitely going to go over there. Mackenzie's going to go over there. I hope everyone on this hangout goes there. Curry, you should totally come. Be my guest.
You should be proposing a talk right now.
Yeah, Matt, are you talking at that?
You have till the 9th, I think.
Allstate's a notoriously international company.
I think I was.
I'm sure the Belfast contingent will make it, Curry.
Yeah, I was asked to talk, and I don't think that that's going to work for my work-life balance at the moment. I got a six-week-old child sitting upstairs, so it's. I think if I went, I'd have to stay probably for a while.
No, you're not going anywhere with the 6-week. You're not going to Germany with a 6-week-old baby, man.
Okay, how about you delegate to someone?
Yeah.
How about the guy with the 5-week-old baby?
Hey, Jason, I got to ask you a question. You're working on an awesome project with one of the largest web companies in Japan on Cloud Foundry. How exciting is that? I can't sleep some nights thinking about that project.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome. And it's pretty interesting to be on a lot of those conversations because there's a small group within Yahoo Japan that's actually, sorry, that kind of rolled out mistakenly. I even knew that, and it just, I need more sleep, James. The accidents happen when you don't sleep enough. It's
Kelsey's
the
calling
baby.
tomorrow.
It's the 5-week-old baby. Yeah. Can we edit that out or something?
She's gonna call tomorrow.
No. It's awesome. But there's a so I'll just pretend that never happened. There's a small group within the company that's really leading the charge, but the whole rest of the company is almost expecting that they are going to be jumping on it almost immediately. So everybody's expecting it to be a wild success, similar to how their OpenStack build was, and the general mentality of everybody in the company is that once it goes live, they're going to have a very small window of time to migrate their entire world over onto it. So it's kind of interesting to see how all that'll play out, where the initial part of it gets launched, and then just a tidal wave of the rest of the company looks to migrate over.
So when you say big, what do you mean in terms of size? What's a big Cloud Foundry install?
So the OpenStack the install that they're running on is north of 50,000 VMs. So
is that big, Kelsey, or is that little for you?
It's the biggest OpenStack deployment in the world.
Kelsey doesn't do any cluster under 100,000 servers, man. He's like big league.
So the thing is that is respectfully big, full stop, straight up. That's big. I mean, I worked at Google too in a data center, right? So I think I've seen really, really big, especially on the bare metal side. But there are not a lot of people in the world that are running that many VMs, right? A lot of people say things, but straight up, most people are definitely in the a few thousand range. That's like the norm that I've seen. So once you start in the 50,000 range, what's that?
They have like one rack.
Yeah, exactly. A cloud and a rack.
These are all actually Raspberry Pis. Don't get excited.
Yeah.
A bunch of Mac Minis.
No, but Jason's territory. Jason does like a lot of the technical work for us in Asia, and you were just over there, Kelsey. But people like Alibaba, Baidu use our technology, and those. I mean, just this order of magnitude of scale in China as well for things. It's kind of mind blowing.
especially China. Like, there is no scale like China. I mean, some of the conversations that I've had with companies in China over the last 3 years really redefine how you think of scale. I mean, I've had conversations with companies that were exploring IS solutions, and one of them was, I won't make the same mistake again, James, I promise. One of them was for a large company in China that everybody knows. And they were looking at setting up a continuous integration, continuous deployment pipeline. And basically their opening of what their requirement was we need to spin up and mount 250,000 VMs in around 15 minutes.
Wow.
And that's just the continuous integration platform that they're running on. Like, those are the constraints that they're really looking at. And you're looking at that thinking, like, you know, like, nothing but network and storage probably, and like, where is even the bottleneck going to be if you're like, yeah, we need to turn on 250,000 VMs in 15 minutes. That's really what they're looking to achieve. And
so
nothing anywhere is that big.
So the installs that you see, are people like straight up running Cloud Foundry and only Cloud Foundry, or do you see a little bit of a mix there, where there's like Cloud Foundry and some Mesos, Cloud Foundry and some bare metal? What are you seeing?
Well, Baidu runs Cloud Foundry on bare metal, and they are hacked it to put a custom scheduler backend in theirs that they kind of forked and modified it a bit for their massive scale. So we're not here to say that you can just drop Cloud Foundry into a data center and you get Baidu. We're not there yet. I think we'll get there. But Baidu's at the edge of the bell curve that does nasty things to software, right? So they've got some customization, but that's the biggest one. And they're looking at, you know, updating to Lattice. They've been, last time I heard notes, Jason, I mean, you tell me what the latest you've heard from them. They're not a customer of ours. They just use the open source there. And then a lot of the banks in China will just use our off-the-shelf enterprise product, though. So there's kind of like, it's like a classic thing. It's really hard to like Mesosphere is not really selling Twitter or anything. I mean, maybe Twitter gives them some money, but it's not like you can walk into Twitter or Google and sell them software. That's just sort of, like, they're so far at the end of the bell curve that there's nothing off the shelf that just runs by definition, I think, for companies like that.
Yeah, and I think that there's certain markets that we resonate very well in, right? So the Cloud Foundry story and having that, you know, I guess something that's a bit more prescriptive resonates very well with FSI. A lot of the banks and insurance, where they're not, you know, their DNA is not really a technology company. They employ a lot of engineers and a lot of tech people, but they're not actually at their core. They're not a tech company. You know, as compared to a lot of companies where their thing is technology. So, you know, most of the companies that are, you know, if you're looking at some of those large tech companies in China, I mean, they'll probably have everything running in a different way. Like, there's 10 different BUs, and every BU has kind of made their own decisions, and it's not mandated that everybody has to go with one thing top down. The only thing that I'm seeing that we seem to really be winning in a very consistent fashion is outside of the technology companies. It seems like most of the conversations that I've been exposed to over the last few years, we're very far out ahead in everything FSI, insurance, a lot of that.
That makes a lot of sense, though, if you consider the whole opinionated platform thing, because realistically, a lot of those companies are not going to be able to have Kelsey Hightower on staff, like helping them, you know, set up a whole bunch of stuff from all of the, you know, components that you can build this.
So what you're trying to say here is Kelsey doesn't scale. That's what I'm trying to say.
I don't know. Allstate's got Matt Curry, and they still use our stack, and he helps us improve it. I mean, I'm not saying our customers can't handle technology. I just think they'd rather spend their time like building value up stack. And frankly, I think companies as large as eBay are crazy that they don't use Cloud Foundry. Crazy. Like, Yahoo and eBay America should totally be using Cloud Foundry, and the only reason they're not is bureaucracy and like NIH. I deeply believe that. And one of the ex-heads of R&D at LinkedIn, who's a buddy of ours at the company, he looked at it, he's like, hey, if I was still there at this time, we would try to use something like this off the shelf. I think it's only when you are Google or Baidu or something 10 sigma that just forget about it.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of companies in China have actually been burned by their own engineering efforts as well. Like that seems to be a really popular theme that they're not wanting to report or to repeat. So there's a lot of companies that have downloaded, an open source project and decided to blaze their own trail, and they rewrote tons of their own business logic into it, and they forked it in a way that prohibits them from kind of remaining current with whatever the upstream head is, and then they're locked onto that version for a year or two.
I was
like
going to say
plenty
that
of people
happens
do that
everywhere.
here. Maybe there's just more people in China.
Well, I mean, you have engineering teams. I mean, I've met companies in China that have 50,000, 100,000 people in an engineering team. Huawei in Shenzhen has 250,000. So there's not many companies that can employ 250,000 people. I mean, when you go to Huawei in Shenzhen, I mean, they have a building that's called the White House because a guy from Huawei went to Washington, D.C. and was inspired by the architecture, and they made like a replica White House in the center of Huawei's campus in Shenzhen. I mean, it's like you're going into a city of its own. I mean, it's wild.
No, Deckel told a story from China where he's like, "Oh, we can save you, a lot of operations people help running your software," and they're like, "We're not worried about saving people costs. We have people, but can you make us more agile and go faster?" They're like, "We have no problem finding people."
Yeah, or
we can throw bodies.
I mean, you were just there, Kelsey. What did you see in China?
I think you guys are spot on with the number of business units. So I was talking to a lot of the Huawei guys, and some of them are Kubernetes contributors. But like any smart company, you need to know what's out there, right? One thing will work for another group. Some people are probably running Mesos, some people are contributing to Kubernetes, and I just think it's always a matter of timing, right? Because you're right. I've used a bunch of solutions where I'm like, look, I don't want to deal with it. Like mail servers are a great example. I have no desire in my life to set up another mail server or spam assassin. I'm done with those forever, right? No matter how many nerd stripes you get for doing so, I'm out. So I think we will just continue to see that platform play across the board. So I definitely believe, this is why I'm just kind of listening. Like, I definitely don't refute these facts. Like, different people are just different spectrums of what they believe they want to build. I see people trying to roll their own Docker stacks and fail badly, like really bad. I'm like, dude, you just got like a Docker for loop going, right, to deploy stuff. Like that's not great. Like you're doing it, maybe you're wasting a bit of time here. So it's legit. So what I found is that they're actually trying everything, and there's probably only a few things that actually make it to production, right? Because you got to have a full package thing, and that's what I'm seeing. So,
but even trying makes a devoted customer. Some of our most devoted customers came from trying to roll their own.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it is if you're imagine if you're the guy that's heading up an engineering team of 100,000 people, you're going to want to hedge your bets. You don't know anything about technology, right? You're relying, and you have 12 different people that are giving you 12 different answers. So it's almost like it's safest just to let them all run in their own direction and let the winner emerge.
So I have a question. I want to switch it up to the tech. One thing that I don't hear a lot about is the innards of Cloud Foundry, like Lattice. When Lattice came out, I checked that project out and it looked pretty cool. What's the state on Lattice? What is its goal, and can you use it outside of Cloud Foundry?
Well, I'll take a run at that. Lattice was just the kind of a preview of the codename stuff Diego, which is if you considered something that combined Mesos and Kubernetes and a ELB auto scaling group into one thing. That's what Diego is. So it has routing the whole way down to scheduling. And it will be generally available sometime in the September, maybe at worst case October timeframe in our enterprise PCF product. So that's pretty cool. I think one thing that we don't do well, and that's the reason we did Lattice, is we don't market our innards. I don't know if you saw the Cloud Opinion tweet. He's like, holy cow, like Cloud Foundry has like 10 or 100x the revenue of everything else in the market, but you don't hear about its innards as much. And I think the reason is that we're fundamentally, for enterprises, a turnkey structured platform where they just give us software, we run it, period. And we don't tend to cater to like the tool users who are like, oh, I want to take console and I want to add this to it and I want to add that to it and I want to roll my own. We have not done a good job of packaging ourselves.
People that care that much about the processor don't have iPhones, right?
Yeah, it's like we're honestly like it's the difference between like the Raspberry Pi crew and the iPhone crew. And like, you know, like can you name the chip in your iPhone? Like you might be able to if you're an ARM nerd. Like maybe you could. I know there's people who can, but it's not what everyone's talking about. And we're sort of like the iPhone for cloud native apps for a data center, less around you know each independent ingredient. And I really like when Adrian Cockcroft was talking about like Eureka for Netflix. He's like, maybe it's not our most proudest thing that we made ever. Maybe there's some things that console does that's a little bit better than it. He's like, but we have a ton of mileage on it, and we beat it into submission, and it really worked for us. And I like to say it's not just about that 1 or 5% incremental. I gave Bridget this talk, sorry. It's not about that incremental, like, oh, we picked one component that's 3% better than the other component in its class. It's how well integrated all those components are into a lifecycle.
That's where the structure and the opinions start to pay off, is when you have that synergistic integration from the top to the bottom.
Yeah.
Yeah,
the
so
way we adopted is... Oh, go ahead, Kelsey.
No, so I think I definitely respect it, but I think it would also make it easier for the person that does want to go out and build their own to fall back.
Well, I think here's the deal, right? Like the way that go ahead. What do you want to do?
Why am I always trying to hire you, Kelsey? Like, why do you think I take you to breakfast? Why do you think I send you nice letters? Why do you think, like, I DM you? Why do you think I told Alex Polvey I was going to hire you? You'd be amazing. Like, we need someone that can market the ingredients. What do I got to send you an offer tomorrow? Like, I've been trying. Like, help a brother out.
Well, but part of it is like not going to be.
Like, Kelsey, I know that we don't do a good enough job of marketing that. So like, you're asking me the very question, which is why I like always stalk you.
It's a little more complicated than that, because it's such a big pill to swallow all at once, and it's a bit opaque, you know, relatively speaking to a bunch of these other components. So because it's a big pill to swallow, because you can't go like the way that the Kubernetes is set up, where you have an API for the scheduler, it kind of forces the community to educate itself about schedulers. It forces the community to have those sophisticated discussions about the scheduling, where if you're trying to replace the scheduling in Lattice right now, like you'd have a totally different starting point. Like it's not as accessible.
I think that's respectable. I think that's cool, though. I think that's actually fine. I think it just helps people understand like, hey, what is the default scheduling algorithm? Because I think once people see those things, they can just say, you know what, this is actually pretty dope, and I actually don't need to waste my time. It's kind of like standard libraries and programming languages.
Here's another little secret there. The default scheduling algorithm of Diego has been changing as we go. So it's like we're having some of those things evolve inside of our own engineering, but it's not just like a community that's totally having that discussion. So like, I think it's a double-edged sword there. Like, I really wish we had more of that out in the open, and that we were educating people like the other communities were. But part of it is just going to be hard until you get more of that decomposition, where you can like actually show someone that it works this way, instead of just like theoretically, or like telling them you got to go like read all this code to even understand.
At the same time, Kelsey, the pattern for us has been like, you know, we've had an unbelievable ramp in terms of our commercial success, which is not everything, right? Like that doesn't mean you're out of the woods. But the way it happens is we install stuff, and then we go in and we teach them how to program with Spring Boot or some of our like very cloud-friendly technologies, and then teams just start writing apps and they go. And so there's a lot less kind of pondering about what is the internal components inside this thing, and it's more of like, I like how this ice cream tastes. Can I have another scoop? That really drives kind of our model.
Right. So go ahead, Bridget.
That said, I came on CFAD like a few months ago, and I remember asking Waters and asking Andrew here, like, so tell me more about this Lattice stuff. Tell me more about this, you know, Cloud Foundry stuff. Why should I care? And honestly, I didn't get answers that helped me really understand why I should care. And so I got to say, Lattice and BOSH did not get me to come work at Pivotal. This guy got me to come work at Pivotal.
I don't know why. I still don't know why.
Because you're awesome.
I I just care. That's all I gotta say.
That's true.
Yeah, so I think I admire their approach of people don't need to understand that stuff.
Sorry, if I just want to kind of close the loop on that so that I can kind of go to what you were addressing, Kelsey, which is I think that one of the things I'm going to try to do early on in my time here at Pivotal, when I'm not doing VMworld or being embedded with the Cloud Ops team, is try to help people who have that mentality of like, hey, I'd like to know more about this stuff. Why do I never hear about it? And why should I care? Because I'm interested. I kind of want to get that messaging and that information out there. So like surface more of that.
Here's another thing I'm going to add here. Waters is always in a sales meeting, and he always has everyone else in the sales meeting. And if he had his way, everyone in Pivotal would be salespeople. Just so you know.
That's not fair. I really care about customers, is how I'd prefer to say that.
That's right. That's what I meant to say.
So Kelsey, from your point of view, like, I think what you're saying is
Smiling Curry.
what I was saying, which is, tell us more about this, because why is it so completely opaque? And I think that that's something that I at least want to fix.
Well, I think it helps engineers like understand that there is some goodness in there, right? Like, it isn't necessarily a black box, right? Like, it's like when people buy a car. You don't really want to replace the engine in your car, but you kind of want to know what's in there, right? Like, hey, maybe it's fast enough or it's good enough on gas mileage that I don't need to concern myself with all this tuning, right? People go to, like, I don't know, AutoZone or something and put a new muffler on. Like, why are you doing that? Like, getting one more horsepower is not worth your time. Go get a car wash and go on your way.
Yeah, but that analogy only works if you're buying a Camry. If you're going to go with Cloud Foundry and you're looking at a Ferrari, do you really care to know the specs of the engine that well? Or do you want to get... I'm just going to throw it out.
Is it a Ferrari? Is it a Camry? Right? That's what I'm trying to understand, because it could totally be a Ferrari. I just don't know what the details are. So if someone told me, hey, here's the specs, here's what the details are, I'll feel a little bit comfortable about that whole decision.
How about we just drive around the block? Go for a little ride, take it out on the freeway, open it up a little bit.
I'd love to get Curry's opinion on this, because Curry's done a great job of actually evangelizing BOSH, which is not a full thing, it's the subcomponent. He's holding a meetup in Arizona around just learning BOSH, which is a subcomponent, etc. So what do you think about this, Matt? What are we doing wrong? What are we doing right?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting discussion. I mean, I think it's kind of strange how Kubernetes came out and scheduling became a hot topic, and when OpenStack came out, nobody really cared about how bad the scheduler was.
That's not true. I did until I rage quit the project.
But to be honest, for like 90% of enterprises, scheduling is not a problem. But your point about the transparency is important. It's like people want to be able to ask and understand, even if it doesn't actually matter. And I think that's the piece that's interesting. There is like this, like how much thought have we put into scheduling? I think the scheduler is pretty good. I think that there are a lot of other limitations on the product, I think, that are being worked on and being improved. That would come.
There goes Arizona.
That are being worked on have a little bit of ways to go before scheduler would be like a top of mind issue.
Yeah, and that gets into, I love this Coda Hail tweet this week, which is like, if you want a true S show at your office, bathe in a sea of novelty. Like,
no, the quote is, if you want to build a, whatever the S show word means that you just said, then teach people to long for the endless sea of novelty.
Right.
Which is a play on a famous quote from the Twas.
Yeah. Meaning, like, I think Matt's point is like,
little T.
Yeah.
Very, very different. Not Machiavelli.
What would Machiavelli do? Is that?
No, it's been revealed what he's actually thinking about. He's not thinking about Le Petit Prince. He's thinking about Machiavelli all the time.
Probably.
Evil.
He gets a bad rap. The guy gets a bad rap.
Hype cycles don't always match what consumers need. Like, they're sometimes based on novelty, i.e., interest, as opposed to need. And that's what I hear Matt articulating, which is like, hey, there's things that we need that are not just about what's novel right now in the conversation.
Yeah, just to frame this up, it's just for me, like, I'm a technical person, and I'm not going to be ever the admin that would sit in a chair and just push the buttons and turn the knobs and open trouble tickets, right? It's just like, I just don't think I would be of any value. I mean, I write more code these days than admin work, but I just don't know if you're doing yourself any justice just blindly using systems without tinkering, if that's what you do, right? I'm not saying everyone does that, but for someone like me, that's what I do. So I'm going to ask the questions, right? I don't expect everyone else to really care at that level.
Which in a lot of places is becoming a luxury, right? Like a lot of our customers, like I tinker every weekend. I would love to nothing more than to go build my own paths right now. But a lot of our customers aren't choosing a paths because, well, it's the next thing on the ladder that you just got to buy. They're choosing because they want to be able to move faster, and they're trying to enable their business units actually writing code, and they want to get more smart people like yourself, Kelsey, writing code that makes the firm or the company money as opposed to testing out ways of squeezing value out of cheaper and cheaper hardware, right? So that's
sometimes that is the job, right? So sometimes that is the job actually, right? It's the fact that we would make another 30 million if we can get the latency on the scheduling time down. Sometimes that is the job. I'm not saying that's the norm. I'm just kind of talking about Kelsey in isolation right now, just to make sure, it's like there are a lot of people that care at this level, and really it's great for every company to have one or two people that care because it could mean a lot more value. And finally, Cloud Foundry is still an open source project, so there's still that community element that is unlike some commercial products that I kind of want to make sure doesn't disappear.
Oh, that can never go away. I mean, I think our idea is to take that community model, drive community engagement. Our mailing list is like huge. Like if you go watch our mailing list traffic, I used to be able to read it all. I can't read it all anymore. It's one of the things that makes me sad. So there's really robust mailing list traffic, and it's constant. I think what people get confused on, though, is the difference between the people that are your technical champions and the people that really need your solution are not always like the same thing. There's a lot of organizations that would never get to the level of something like a Cloud Foundry if we didn't bring it in whole cloth and help them get going with it. Like they would really struggle to get to something that sophisticated on their own. And I see them every day. And even if it was just the politics of building something, they need an outside person to come in and help and just say, here it is.
Well, and James, like you mentioned earlier, they also very well some of them could build something like that, but is that their core business goal? Is that what they want to spend their engineers' time doing? Or do they want to spend value for
and how long until that's a mail server that you don't want to deal with it?
Yeah, I mean that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to turn microservices management into a mail server. Like, why would you do that? And we think the patterns are big enough to have a dedicated R&D team against that gets into the 500, 600, 1,000 person range for microservices management and turns that into something that no one wants to go try to do. And then we're going to solve all kinds of new awesome software engineering problems once that's boring. Like, our job is to just raise the waterline and make that boring. I think the only reason that's controversial is there's a lot of people trying to make that boring right now, and some of them are not taking as holistic of an approach as we are. So there's maybe, rightfully so, some debate about that. What happened there?
I don't know, like the browser just crashed, basically.
You frozen.
I'm here.
It said, oh snap, something went wrong. It's like, thanks luck.
That means the thread or whatever that's running the JavaScript died in our Chrome.
I'm seeing weird tweets that Kanye West announced he's going to be president. What?
What?
I'm wondering how these nuts candidacy goes.
Oh boy! Don't get me in trouble, Schaefer.
I mean, are you guys reading politics? This is relevant stuff.
No, sorry. I've looked at Twitter to see if paging between things and noticed that it was terrifying.
9%.
So what else happens? What else happens week in people's worlds? Like, Matt's raising a 6-week-old. I'm getting ready for this awesome announcement tomorrow with VMware, and it's an hour into the show, so I think we can get a little bit deeper on secrets. I mean, I think the cool thing we're going to do is we're going to allow people to have one product for cloud native apps, just turnkey, one thing to buy, one scale out solution, one amazing set of economics all integrated together, one R&D team working on it. You give us hardware, we allow you to create cloud native apps. And I think there's a huge segment of the market where something that's optimized the whole way from the hardware to the framework is going to be pretty nifty. And I think a lot of software that wouldn't have got written before is going to get written and created now because people have this agility and this ease. And I think it's pretty cool. So that's my secret for the week.
Did you guys cover Spring Boot? Like, I'm new to that. Bridget, have you had a chance to play with Spring Boot or kind of look at it? It seems like it's making some noise and some traction.
I haven't had a lot of chance to play with it yet. The part that I find interesting about it is the whole Spring Boot and Spring Cloud thing. I wish you could get Josh Long on here talking more about that. Seems to make a lot of space for people who have existing Java apps that they want to bring to the cloud, and they aren't really positive how they're going to do that. It seems to make a pretty easy path to that, is what I'm given to understand. Does that sound at all right?
Not necessarily, in the sense that like your existing Java apps that might have been written for some of these old containers aren't immediately going to be amenable to the assumptions Spring Boot wants to make about the world. But
okay.
I mean, Spring
What
Boot.
kind of path does it give people then?
So what's
I'm going to throw up the download chart just so people see this, because we're just looking at this phenomena happening like it's one of our products, and it just keeps going.
So what Spring Boot does, at least the way I would paraphrase it, is it takes some opinions about how to do things. A lot of those opinions were kind of pioneered by projects like Dropwizard, and it gives you, with a little bit of configuration, but not too much, some pretty powerful primitives to kind of have like a RESTful service running with very little code, right? And it's all packaged in a fat jar with all of its dependencies. So there's really just the single jar that's a deployable artifact. You don't need a big, like, weird Java container thing. You just run it as a thing, and you can kill -9 it and see the thing. The other thing that you get with Spring Boot out of the box is a bunch of metrics and telemetry that's like kind of built into the system. So you have this running process. You can see things about what's going on. You can make sense of it, and then operationalize those little deployable jars. And so when you think about something like a platform where you want to be able to do the scale-out architecture, kind of like out of the box, Spring Boot just gives you the 12-factor app model, kind of like with a little bit of scaffolding, and then you can put that on a platform, scale it out, and peel out.
So you don't necessarily bring your entire existing Java app as it is.
In fact, you probably will have a bad time if you
try to do that. Yeah. But it does sound like you don't necessarily need to write all of the things one would otherwise need to write from scratch, because it sounds like the platform provides a lot of that.
So like you have a yak with a bunch of fur, and then like all of a sudden there's no fur. Like that's Spring Boot basically. Like you wanted to do this thing, like you wanted to have the little RESTful service. You wanted to connect it to a database, and so with a little bit of scaffolding, like you just throw this stuff into the whatever Maven build thing you got going, and like you have a little RESTful service connected to your database, and it all just works. And
yeah,
like, so
I could teach you to write RESTful services in Java with Spring Boot in a day. Like this is very little code. It's not a lot. You don't have to learn a lot of the configuration and formatting conventions of Java to be effective with Spring Boot. And that's what makes people so excited, is they get the compatibility with all their other Java skills that they have, but they can eliminate a lot of the boilerplate and a lot of the overhead of using Java. And it kind of gives them an evolutionary path to do microservices that are refactored out of the existing Java monoliths. So it's like people keep trying to like inject these radically hipster languages into enterprise apps, and it notoriously fails time and time and time again, right? Like you ask the people that were big on Rails, they thought, oh, well, Rails is going to take over the enterprise because it's great at CRUD. A lot of enterprise apps are CRUD, and it's just like Rails is going to take over the enterprise. Rails penetration in the enterprise is de minimis, less than 5%, I'd say. And that's a good a good run into its maturity. Like
But
so, cloud.
those opinions changed pretty rapidly once those people actually wrote a sizable Rails app. And then they were like, well, maybe that's not such a good idea.
Well, yeah. So
As I like to say, it starts with R and ends with ales.
So Kelsey asked me a good question. He's like, James, what are you talking about this Java BS? He's like, who's writing microservices in Java? Like, what are you talking about, man?
Let me clarify though. Like, I know a lot of people are writing, microservices in Java. I manage multiple teams where it was a full Java stack, right? So I'm definitely well aware that most of the enterprise Java is just the thing. Now, the other thing was about momentum, and that most people are becoming polyglots. And when you come into a polyglot world, it's not just Java. JVM is awesome, which means you bring in Clojure, you bring in all kind of things. But just writing plain old Java, like that is the question that I'm posing here.
Well, and I think we certainly, our platform is polyglot, but what we've seen is that having something like Spring Boot really allows, say, telcos and banks and these companies that are not like in the hipster crowd to make a major step forward. And we took, one of the biggest cable companies in the world is one of our customers, and we did a workshop there where they publicly tweeted, "Oh my gosh, Spring Boot is rocking Comcast." They're like, "This is a revolution." Like, we would not have been able to write all the, they tweeted it publicly, right? This is what they said. It's a tweet, I can share it. They're like, this is proper black magic. This is so much simpler than any of the Java we've done before. It's really evolutionary for us. So it's less that Spring Boot is competing to be the new hipster language, and it's more like it gives you 95% of the goodness of microservices in a very evolutionary way. And the other thing that's cool is that there's something called Spring Cloud, which is actually used by Netflix. So if I'll buy you a ticket to come out to Spring One, actually, Kelsey. I think it'd be really intellectually entertaining for you. It's in Washington, D.C., and you'll see Netflix there presenting about how they use Spring technologies to run Netflix. And so there's a very virtuous circle. So you can run the Netflix stack and on top of Spring Boot very painlessly. And the idea to have all of that distributed infrastructure at almost no cost within a proven framework like Spring is really enticing to enterprises that are already using it.
So is this more about the frameworks? Because I think a lot of times we see a lot of these gains and benefits by taking things that work over time and then turning them into, like, what? These have worked over the last 10 years. Let's slap a label on it. This is the new way of doing things. Everyone just starts from a new starting point.
Yeah, I think what's happened is that the new patterns have been incorporated into the Spring framework, and that gave people the sense that it's evolutionary, and they gobbled it up. It's like they wanted change, but they wanted it in an evolutionary way, and we cannot keep evangelist staff to give workshops fast enough. And that applies to over in China, Josh Long, who's the guy you should meet. He was with Alibaba, which is a Spring user. He was with Baidu, and they're both going to use Spring Boot and Spring Cloud. Like, these are not like even like people at the scale like that think this is amazing infrastructure. So yeah, it doesn't win the hipster competition. It's not trying to. But if you're trying to fund an R&D division of 1,000 people, you need to hit the core of the market, and I think that's where we're aiming.
I think the other thing that's interesting about Polyglot is be interested to see what other people are seeing kind of in the industry, because in my experience, it's maybe you get some Polyglot, but it's all on the JVM, because running microservices is non-trivial. So all that tooling and telemetry and distributed tracing and all of those things that you kind of have to make that level of complexity manageable. If you have to rebuild that for every runtime, that becomes a huge task. And I haven't seen a lot of people who said, hey, we're running kind of a lot of different runtimes as a part of Polyglot answer. Most of it's all, if there's Polyglot, it's all on the JVM.
Yeah, I think what you're seeing is that things are going to be happening from underneath the apps, right? Because libraries do a lot where you kind of import a library and you build from that. But some of the things that I've seen pretty interesting is, and I'm pretty sure you guys can do it as well inside of Cloud Foundry, is once you have access to like all the output from the app can ever produce, every system call, every bit of output, you can kind of do tracing underneath the covers with little assistance from the app. Now, application level tracing definitely can be aided by a library, but some of the nicer things that I'm seeing is where the platform itself just has it built in, right? If I deploy you, I know what you can and can't do, and I can aggregate that stuff. So it's not necessarily at the level of Spring Boot because I haven't played with it, so I don't want to kind of make comparisons there. But some of the things that I like that are interesting are what Sysdig is doing, for example. Right? You have a bunch of legacy apps that you can't probe, like Postgres and MySQL easily. But Sysdig goes in there, and when you start taking all the system calls that an app makes, you can draw some things that people don't even know to capture. So I think we're starting to see a little bit of evolution there.
That's only looking at the one node, the process on the one system. When you start to like try to debug a distributed system, you need more sophisticated distributed tracing stuff.
Well, that's where the analysis comes in, right? So as you collect all these data, because right, you want data from all sources. There's data that comes from the app. There's data that actually comes from all of the processes running throughout the cluster. And once you aggregate all of the data, then you can start doing analysis on the collective, right? Because you're never going to get too far with just one set of data.
But how do you, I mean, with like 100% certainty, how do you correlate across a super busy cluster to figure out what call resulted in what call from one system to another?
Oh yeah, so that's where the sauce is these days, right? So you can go pretty far, like what Spring Boot's been doing, and I think New Relic kind of kicked off this whole APM idea that you import something and start measuring. You can use IDs, but there's other data that you want, right? There's data that comes from system calls that you're not going to necessarily get from your app. So you're right.
So let me just paint a picture for you. Like, let's just say you had a dashboard that had all your system level, VM level metrics, then a bunch of metrics from containers, then a bunch of metrics from your runtimes, whatever metrics you want to pump into from your app because you want to, plus APM, plus distributed tracing with annotations for events like deployments in one dashboard. Would that look like a platform?
Well, so that's cool, but there's a different set of questions you ask, right? So that's data. The biggest problem people have with data, they don't know what questions to ask of it. So you can present data all day long, but the power comes from people actually having reactive systems on the data. So there's two things.
There's absolutely truth to that, right? Like the hardest thing is to know what questions to ask. But if you have a bunch of graphs that always look a certain way and all of a sudden they look different, you start asking a lot of questions really fast. That's all I'm saying. Like,
I totally get you. So the question was, how are we doing this, right? So frameworks and libraries give people a great starting point because they're just common things everyone wants to know about their application, right? And then there's other things. So I think as we continue to level people up and everything we're talking about now becomes the standard, then things like what system calls is my app making become a new thing that people want to know about and start correlating. So I'm just saying as we level up.
I mean, and here's the thing that I think, like all of our projects are kind of on this path. It's like all this stuff is being done, right? Like there's organizations that are doing this. It's just not what everyone's able to do right now. And I feel like the opportunity, when you see like this cloud native movement, you're basically taking all these things that everyone's been doing, all these things that these organizations, we'll call them the cloud natives, have been doing, and we're just packaging it and trying to bring it to the enterprise so they could do it too. Like that's the game.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So this is why I look at Cloud Foundry, right? I don't ignore the tech. I look at Cloud Foundry as the thing that goes all the way to the edge of what people will end up either building or buying. And I always explain Kubernetes as 2 or 3 steps below that, right? Because you still have to do a lot of work. You don't bring in Kubernetes and you're finished, right? You basically have a new starting point for building your own platform. So
yeah, that's right on. That's why we hired. I shared a link. I don't know if folks can see. What's the best way to pronounce the Twitter Scala framework? Finagle? Is it? I don't know I've never heard.
It's Finagle.
Yeah, Finagle. Sorry, it's
Finagle.
I figured that I was mispronouncing it, but the thing that I always observe is like Netflix goes the whole way up to kind of an opinionated framework. Twitter goes the whole way up to opinionated framework. Like none of these companies work in a way where you just as a developer pick your language that day and just start throwing code into the platform because they want to do correlations and tracing the whole way up through the framework. And so, Adrian Cole, who just started here, is like a million times deeper than us, I think. He did distributed tracing at Netflix, and then he did OpenZipkin at Twitter. And he's building all of that into the one reason we like a opinionated framework is he's building all that distributed tracing for OpenZipkin into Spring Boot right now, such that you can offer an enterprise, like if you use this framework, you're going to get all this distributed tracing infrastructure. And the goal that Ben Black has working with Adrian is to say, this line of code was slow. Like the trace is so clear, you can actually go into like the line of code where it was executed and bring that back to your version control system. So in some dream world, you're looking at your operational dashboard for your app, and it pops you back into version control with like a little arrow, like, yo, look here, this was slow.
Fix your stuff.
And you obviously have to factor out like things like system performance or other things could have affected it in that. But I mean that's our dream, and that's where I was laughing at people saying, oh well, you don't want to be using Java or any of that. I'm like, yeah, there's some pretty advanced frameworks that are built around this to help you do things. Like just throwing that in Node.js could be fun, but if you want to maintain 700,000 lines of Node.js, that
Call me back.
I'll pour you a drink.
Please no.
So it's almost 10 after midnight, and I'm going to go get sushi at Ryoko. If anyone wants to join me.
Yeah,
Dan,
so if you're
3 slides to make?
I made a few slides.
He actually, here's a secret. Most of this time when Andrew was kind of off to the side, he was making slides. I watched. He was making slides.
I mean, there's usually slides at my talks. That's all I'm going to say. They somehow get made.
I would love to go, but I got a lot to do myself. I got to finish this blog. I'm super excited about this Turnkey Photon platform tomorrow with VMware. And I think it's awesome to have Bridget legitimately on this show, and Kelsey came. I feel smarter.
This is super exciting. So, Kelsey, are you going to be coming to CFAD more often?
This is my second one, I think, so I always try to pay attention, especially when news is getting announced. So for me, my biggest thing is just to make sure when people ask me about Cloud Foundry, I can respond with like facts. I'm yet to deploy one, and I think I need to do that to really solidify, just a conversation, because you just don't know until you actually put your hands on it. So that's kind of my next mission here is to throw up a Cloud Foundry stack and leave it running so I can kind of know how it works.
You and me both. That's what I'm doing next week. And hey, your questions mean that I actually learned a lot about Spring today, which is great. Since I asked no one anything about Spring last week, it was all, the Cloud Apps, Pivotal Web Services hosted stuff. Which, by the way, they have some really cool stoplight dashboarding stuff because it addresses exactly what Andrew was talking about, which is when it starts looking different than it's supposed to look. But if you don't know what it's supposed to look like, having a dashboard that just says this is now yellow tells you it just got worse.
A little shaky on that.
Yeah, they open sourced all those Datadog dashboards too, so it's out there on GitHub.
Yep, they did a blog post too about exactly. Are there show notes?
Yeah.
Do we do show notes for this?
I just
have a-
added the link for the blog post.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. Excellent. There's a link there for the blog post.
But that won't go into the no one watching the video can see that.
No one watching the video can see that. So if we don't capture it out of the chat and paste it into show notes.
Cote does. He transcribes them and puts them into podcasts.
Excellent.
But he doesn't stay up to do craziness with CFAD. I think he's never been on, has he?
Not yet.
Not yet.
There's always a first. He's usually home with wife and kids. So if we get him on the road, the right timing, maybe we could get him up.
So Waters, I saw that you very carefully did not even announce that you were starting to tell secrets. Are we telling secrets?
He kind of did. He said it's an hour. We're like. Yeah.
I mean, I love secrets. I feel like Kelsey gives me a hard time because I always tweet the news the night before it comes out, or I hint at it. Like, to me, social media gets so boring if you're not giving those people a little extra flavor, right? Like if there's no human connection there that's like really just you and your life that you're sharing, then it's just individual PR, which sucks.
I mean, who would want to share your life? I mean, come on.
I learned this week that Bridget loves taking selfies with interesting people.
I do. It's true.
Except for me. Like, I don't know how I got into that lineup, but that happened too. And I learned that Kelsey is like an autodidactic maniac that I deeply admire for that level of like constant autodidactic like hunger. Like he's always like, what about this shit? What about this shit? Like that's why I love social media is actually when people reveal themselves. And I've got to get Curry to open up a bit more. Like I'm excited about the BOSH meetups.
Yeah, man, we're excited about it. We were just throwing the idea around because we were getting a lot of questions about BOSH, and we were like, we can't cover this in a 1-hour meetup talk. Like, we need a full day, and we bet a bunch of people would be interested. So just threw it out there to see if there's any interest. I think there will be.
And Dimitri's driving a 15, 16 person engineering team on BOSH right now, so that thing's only going up and to the right in terms of its investment and interest over the next year. And it's weird. People go, first they start like, why are you opinionated the whole way down to the OS? And then they learn it. They're like, why are we deploying anything else except with this? Like even a government agency went through that kind of weird, like, screw you.
Once you accept that BOSH is your new package manager, you'll be fine.
Yeah.
Accepting BOSH as your personal savior / package manager.
Slash. That's a good slash.
Yeah, I think the Docker support is, we're digging that because that starts to solve the vended software problem, which I think is the biggest issue with BOSH is it's sometimes hard to get a stem cell when you have somebody just shipping you like an OVA or a Docker image. So we're totally stoked about the Docker support.
So if anyone is watching this in San Francisco, I'm going right now. Real code. It's open until 2.
I'm a block away.
It's like a block away from me.
I'm going to go with him. I'm going to listen to him. I'm going to smile. I'm not going to eat sushi. I'm actually a vegetarian.
Hey, I'm stuffed. I like you folks. I got work to do, so I got to do that.
I got work to do too, but, duty calls.
It was fun, Kelsey. Thanks for coming. Great to see you, Jason. Shashar.
Yep.
See you guys. See you, Matt.
See you.
Mark, as always.
See you guys.
All right. Take care.
And then you stop the broadcast.